Good evening. Today is Monday, January 29th, and I'm going to call to order the special Board of Education meeting, special operations meeting for this evening to discuss the budget. There is no one here for public comment, so we will go ahead and move to the third item on our agenda, which the first item is the review of the food services budget. So I think I'm going to turn that over to you, Mr. Bondi.
Yes, good evening. Okay, on the food service budget for the 2024-2025 school year, couple of budget notes. The budget is based on the assumption of what used to be a normal school year. Hopefully we go back to that next year where there's no special federal reimbursement or state reimbursement for free meals, things like that. The budget is derived from meal counts based on the overall average meal counts from September and October of this year. And I put in a small reduction in paid breakfast counts for next year in the budget because we're assuming that breakfast will not be free next year for everyone, but we don't know for sure yet. Under revenues, breakfast and lunch revenues are based on meals served times the price. Our a la carte and adult revenues are based on the average sales from September and October of this school year.
Excuse me, Mr. Bondi, can you just let us know what page you're on?
Sure. Okay, we are on Section 6, page 1.
Okay.
Actually, Section 6, page 2 would be a better
Okay, thank you.
definition, or better visual to follow along. Our a la carte and adult revenues are based on the average sales from September and October of this school year. Our state grant payments are based on typical payments in a normal school year. And our breakfast and lunch reimbursement is based on reimbursement rates with the typical yearly federal increases. So our total revenue in the budget for next year is $2,715,616. Section 3, excuse me, product cost. Our food cost is calculated at 43% of revenues, which is a little higher than it is currently, but we're anticipating some increases in food costs for next year. And our paper and cleaning costs are calculated at 4% of revenues. Under payroll, our payroll is based on anticipated yearly payroll costs with the contractual wage increases for school year 2024-2025. And our benefits also reflect the anticipated increases. Under direct costs all reflect historical average costs per month, and these are based on the last 2 school years. So we have total expenses, including payroll and product costs and other direct costs, of $2,715,981 and a budget deficit of $365, which is just about break even. Any questions?
I do have a question.
Sure.
You back up at the top when you were talking about reimbursements. You thought the reimbursements were going to go down. When you reduced it from a previous estimation because it's actually going up. You have it at 298 from.
No, when I paid breakfast counts, I reduced a little bit for next year because we're anticipating that breakfast will not be free next year.
And where is that?
Actually, it's not on here, but that's
okay.
what the budget is based on.
Oh, okay, I understand. Okay, thank you.
Meal counts, yes.
Yeah, Jim, how much are we paying now, say, for milk? How much does a child pay for milk?
Well, milk comes with the meal, and if they buy it À la carte, it's 50 cents.
50. And how about a elementary school lunch?
It is what is it, 325? 325, correct.
And the high school?
High school is 345, middle school is 335. And those prices are not changing for next year.
They're not changing?
No.
What was I gonna ask? Now, what was the rule, maybe it's not even applicable anymore, when you have the free and reduced lunches, something about the costs can't exceed,
You're going to challenge me here. The
You don't
paid
have to.
lunch equity.
Right, okay.
How do I put this?
We always
the-
had to maintain a certain
Yes, the
discrepancy.
federal
Are we
government-
okay with that?
Yes.
That's what you need to tell me.
Yeah, that's,
We are?
we're good.
We're
Yes,
good?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, and if breakfast, which is free now, we would still serve it,
Oh, correct, yes.
and how much would that be?
Breakfast
Do we
is
have a price on that?
$2 at the elementary level, $2.10 at the middle school, I believe $2.15 at the high school, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
We haven't charged that in so long
I
now.
know, okay. What was the elementary again? $2,
$2, I believe.
okay. Thank you.
Mr. Sasso?
Jim, just to let you know, they did reintroduce to the legislature today to continue the free breakfast
Yes, I heard that.
for the state, so it may,
We may or may not see that.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah, well, the federal government has always been headed that way. It depends on the elections and everything else for next year, but right now, we have to assume that it will be a normal school year.
Oh, thank you. I was just wondering, Jim, are we normally, like, revenues there and expenditure there so that it's a break even usually every year?
That is always our goal,
Okay.
yes, yes.
We've just, because of all the funding we received in that program with the free lunches, we've had some large profits last couple years, but.
Surpluses, yes.
Surpluses, so I would, correct term, I guess, but, you know, the goal is to be about break even.
Mr. Ross?
Yeah, are we planning on offering lunches during vacation?
I'm sorry?
Are we planning on offering lunch during vacations?
During which vacation?
School vacations?
No, not, for next year, it wasn't in the budget, no.
Okay, well, some families depend on this lunch to subsist on, and if we don't offer it, then there's a problem for the families. You know, a lot of the families that are currently getting free lunches, if during school vacation that week, they don't get food unless they go to other areas. So
Yes.
I'd like to see us account for that.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Bondi, maybe you can speak to some of the guidelines and restrictions that were put on to us as we talked about in food service committee, when we talked about the potential of being able to serve lunch over the summer. When we had tried that, there was a lot of restrictions that you weren't able to grab and go. You had to come. It was only a very certain window. There was a ton of restrictions that made it very hard, especially for working parents. So maybe you can just speak to that so it doesn't look like we're just trying to not
Yes, no,
offer the
during,
meals.
yeah. During COVID, there were special circumstances where parents can just drive up, let us know how many lunches or breakfast they needed, and we would just put it in their car for them. That is not the case anymore. That has changed last year. Right now, we're doing congregate meals where the students have to come in to the cafeteria. It has to be a specialized summer school program or something to that extent. Otherwise, we are not able to serve meals.
Mr. Barone, did you have a comment?
No, I think it kind of got covered with that explanation.
And I do have one additional question. So I know that we're striving for break even, and I also know that you, use some of the surplus that we did have a surplus that you did use to buy some capital items.
Correct.
Is there still a surplus account, and how much is in that account?
I don't know off the top of my head because we're still purchasing from it.
Okay.
So I can get you that information maybe during the Friday update.
But
For the
but
Friday
there is a
update.
surplus.
Sure.
There is definitely a surplus.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just to clarify.
Yeah.
You just
So-
don't know how much it is, not,
Yes,
that- yeah.
and by federal law, we need to spend that down because we can't show
Right.
profits.
So yes, we can put that in the Friday update,
Thank you.
a clearer number for that, but there is a surplus, yes.
And I would assume that throughout the year, as things are needed, you will tap into the surplus for the capital expenditures.
Correct. There
Okay.
are capital expenditures planned, but we can also tap in,
Okay.
if we need things here and there.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Mr. Bondi? Yes, Mr. Bondi. You looked at me like, I was like, wait. All right, so what I would like to do right now is go ahead and take consensus on this budget. If we're ready to send this, if there are no other questions, then we can go ahead and take consensus on this, and we can send this through to the next budget meeting. So I will just go around the room to take consensus on just the food services budget. Mr. Ross,
No,
Mr. Daring,
Yes.
Dr. Roscoe,
Yes.
Ms. Passaretti,
Yes.
Ms. Rasachi,
Yes.
Mr. Votto,
Yes.
Dr. Reed,
Yes.
and Mrs. Reyes? And I am also a yes. So that passes 8-1. We will put that on to the next budget meeting. Thank you. All right, moving on to the next agenda item, we are going to address some questions that came up from the board members. These are the questions, we submitted the survey, so if you do have questions that have not been answered and that you would like to address, I'd like to go through those now. These are the board questions. So, I mean, we can start with the questions, just to make sure that the answers have been addressed in the way that you would like them to. And then if you, I know that there's several of us who have additional questions that have formulated afterwards. So we'll just start with the questions and responses. And the first one was about the number of mental health calls that were decreasing starting in June of 2023, and any indication of what could have caused this. Was that, I don't know who asked the question, but I just want to make sure that that question was addressed to your satisfaction.
I just wanted to say one thing. I was just going to say, historically, 211 calls always go down in June across the 211 system, so that's pretty standard. They go down in June, July, and August, and then they ramp back up again once school starts, so that's pretty historical across the state.
Thank you. I think I had noted that too as part of mine, but I just want to make sure that there are no more questions around that particular item. If not, then we will move on to, this is my question. The certified faculty shows a decrease of 4 instructional support teachers. I think this was mine, maybe not. What is meant by instructional support, why are they being increased, and what building are they coming from? So, I don't know that I really understand the answer to that one, so if you could address that, that would be I'd be thankful, thank you.
So the decrease of the instructional support teachers, the 4 that were grant funded, if you recall, 3 years ago when we got the ARP funding, we put or advertised teachers on special assignment. The purpose was to provide instructional support to our teaching staff coming out of the COVID pandemic in lesson planning, small group instruction, data-driven analysis to help close achievement gaps for our students. We have them placed at the 3-5 schools this school year. And there are 4 remaining. The first year of the grant, we had, I want to say 10. The second year, we had 6. And then this year, we have 4. So this is the last year of the grant. The funding runs out, which is why you see that in the enhancement section of the budget.
These were temporary positions, correct? Are they, so these were temporary assignments, and these teachers will be assigned back to a classroom, correct?
Correct. As part of the agreement we had with our teachers union, this provided opportunities for teacher leadership. We removed the teachers from their teaching assignment with the understanding that they would go back to their regularly, I want to say scheduled program, but their placement at the conclusion of their assignment. So the people that are in the classrooms now are temporary teachers on 1-year contracts, hired specifically for the purpose of that 1-year assignment.
And so we have seen we've seen a decrease of these support specialists as the grants have run out, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Are there any other questions around this? Dr. Roscoe?
I can never tell if this light is on. In all the work that you did for our reading waiver, can you give us some clarification if you had to list out the amount of supports in addition to the core curriculum, and does that affect it one way or another as we talk about some of these things running out because they're grant funded?
Sure. So as part of our waiver, there were several different parts of the waiver. The first part was our curriculum and our curriculum narrative that went along with it. We had to submit the K-3 curriculum, and then we had to provide context to the different domains of foundational reading. That was the bulk of the waiver. The second part of the waiver was our data analysis piece, where we had to provide particular data that the state was looking for, as well as our subgroup information related back to that reading data. So STAR, at the time, early literacy, et cetera. The third part of the waiver was a section called strategy explanation, and we had to provide a detailed analysis of what we were doing as a school system to address remaining reading achievement gaps. So in that section, we listed out several things: high quality resources with some of the things that we were using, personalized learning software, access to high quality staff, which is where our instructional coaches were listed. So this section of the waiver listed the work that our instructional coaches were doing in the K-3 classrooms. We listed the access to literacy how coaching. We listed English language and multilingual teaching support and intervention support. So it was a component of the broader section of our waiver. We did not list how many instructional coaches to teaching ratio or anything of that sort, but we did list within that section the fact that our classroom teachers relied on instructional coaches to assist in the things that I just described for Mrs. Regan, in terms of really looking at how the curriculum is implemented within the classroom. We know, thankfully, through our waiver process, that the state sees our curriculum how we see it, as the strong foundation that it is for reading development. And now, at the point that we're at, which we talked a little bit about last week, is the implementation of that curriculum to ensure consistency and equity from class to class, school to school. And a big part of that is with our instructional coaching staff, who will sit with classroom teachers to review the main components of the curriculum, where their students are within the classroom, how to plan most appropriately for the students who are sitting in front of them, because Every classroom is different and has a different makeup and a different need. How to use the data from our screens and our observations within the classroom to form our lessons and our targets for instruction in small group and whole group. And then how to provide the best instructional support to move our students from dependent learners into independent learners and readers.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That was a very thorough explanation, so I appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks.
I just have a couple follow-up questions. How many coaches would be left if you reduce by 4?
So at the elementary level, sorry. We currently have 4 that would be left. We have at the K2 level for our board and for the public, we have 2 literacy coaches and 2 numeracy coaches at that primary level. We chose in that respect to keep it very content specific, to be able to provide really targeted PD to our coaches and clear lines of communication to our staff. At the 3-5 level, we went more global. With the grant-funded positions, there are instructional coaches that cover every content area. So if we were not to receive the instructional coaches that are in the enhancement section of the budget, we would need to rework our structure, because I cannot, in good conscience, leave 3-5 without any instructional support. And again, for our new board members, as well as for our public who are listening, we also do have instructional coaches at the middle school level, and then we have instructional leaders at the high school level that are shared between the 2 high school and are very content specific as well.
And how many are at the middle school?
There are 2. There is a STEM instructional coach and a humanities instructional coach. So you'll often find that they are never in the same building at the same time. And they are working with, obviously, the English department and the social studies department, primarily as well. The STEM coach is working with the math science department. And at the high school, we have a math instructional leader, an English instructional leader, social studies instructional leader, and a science instructional leader.
Shared between both high schools, there's 4 of
Yes.
them? Okay.
Yep.
All right, and then do they still do small group instruction in the classroom?
Yes, everywhere.
Everywhere, in
So-
each level?
Yes.
Okay.
So obviously, it varies from class to class, especially as you go up in the grades. It is a heavy component in K-5. It is a heavy component in middle school, English and social studies especially, as well as math. And then even in the high school, you'll see it in a lot of the different content areas as the teachers move past their focus lesson and get into small group instruction for students to participate in their learning.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, moving on. The next, I'm going to combine some of these questions. There were some questions around the CID regarding the duties of the director and some of the programs at the CID. So there are some answers there. Have those answers been addressed? I know that we also got a copy of the presentation that Mr. Stone and Mr.
Wasbrook.
Wasbrook, that was, I knew it was a W, that Mr. Wasbrook did. So that was a very thorough presentation. So have those questions been, are there any other questions? Mr. Deering?
Thank you. So I really appreciate all the information, both that we received here and that we received in Mr. Stone's presentation. It seems like a really wonderful program we have. Just one thing I'm trying to still fully wrap my head around. So how exactly does this interplay with what's going on in the classroom? How is it determined what happens at the CID versus what happens in the classroom?
So there's not exactly a black and white answer to that question, Mr. Deering. When we talk about the during the school day activities, it is very much a deeper dive into what is happening in the classroom. It's specifically geared towards giving students the opportunity at the center, utilizing the resources that are there for deeper learning and understanding of the scientific content that is being worked on. with the exception of, as we talked about in our presentation, kindergarten, which we're going to bring the CID to them just for logistical reasons, especially in this first year. Same goes for middle school. When they come, it'll be an extension to the learning that is happening in the room. The other programs that occur at the center, whether it's after-school activities like the Invention Club that they mentioned, or family STEM nights, or the work of the planetarium, really are specific to outside of that classroom. It is generally an enhancement, not a part of the curriculum, where it gives our students, our community members, our families an opportunity to work with innovation and design thinking and opportunities for learning that go well beyond what we would be able to do in the classroom.
Thank you. Just to be clear, so I'm referring to the stuff that happens during the school day. So is everything that's happening at the CID during the school day stuff that cannot be happening in the classroom? What's the advantage of bringing the students to the CID rather than the CID to the students?
So some of it is the resources and materials and the experience itself, to be at the center with the work that's being done curricularly and with the resources that have been donated to open the center in the first place. It just can't be replicated within the classroom. And
So
it can't be packed up and sent from school to school. Logistically, that just would not work.
Okay, so these are materials that can't be transported easily.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Votto?
Yeah, are the classroom teachers, I don't want to use the word capable, but are they trained? Are they, do they have the ability to incorporate what's in that program without any kind of training? In other words, you mentioned the word enhancement. Do they know when they could use that enhancement and use the CID for that purpose? I don't know if I'm stating it
I
correctly.
think I'm understanding you correctly. It's a highly orchestrated experience when the teachers are bringing their classrooms over to the center. And we do that for several reasons, right? This is connected to the curriculum, and we want to ensure that this isn't a one-shot moment in time for our students. So Mr. Stone and Mr. Wasbrock have developed a series of pre-activities where the teachers receive professional development and work regarding the content that is being taught within the curricular unit. They've developed lessons and opportunities for students to initiate their thought process regarding content so that when they get to the center, they have some background knowledge to build from. The work that's done at the center is very much hands-on. Our teachers are there, very much working side by side, elbow to elbow with our students, as are our chaperones, our family volunteers that come along with them. And then there's learning that's also done back in the classroom as a post-experience enhancement to their learning, where they take the learning that occurred from the pre-learning activities and the actual activity at the center, and they continue to move with it. So we purposely did that because, as you know, Mr. Votto, a unit of study takes anywhere from 3 to 5 weeks, depending on how often you're teaching science in the elementary level. So we didn't want the center activity to be in isolation and a one-shot deal. We wanted it to be very much at the center of the unit and have students continue to learn and grow with that content through the work that's happening both with their classroom teacher in the classroom, but then also with the work that's happening at the center.
So
I don't
they
know if
would-
I'm making sense.
They would be able, yeah, you are. I mean, they
Okay.
would be able to, they would know in what way that center could enhance whatever they're teaching in their classroom.
Absolutely.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yep.
And do they, or have they already had professional development in that area?
Yeah, so Mr. Stone and Mr. Wasbrock try to, or they did, actually, they didn't try. They did a very great job of doing that this year with the different opportunities for each grade level. They met with the grade level team of teachers prior to the entire grade level coming over to the center to work through the unit, answer questions, talk about the pre-learning activities. They would do that either through an early release day where they brought the teachers in all together to talk about the learning that was going to happen, or they would go to a grade level meeting at each one of the schools, depending on the schedule and the time of day. So, you know,
Who would do that?
Mr. Wasbrock and Mr. Stone.
Out of their day, they could do that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So, you know, because Mr. Wasbrock brings to the table the scientific content knowledge of NGSS, and Mr. Stone brings to the table the innovation and STEM design thinking piece to it. They very much, you know, work together collaboratively to build these experiences for our students, and to include in those experiences the feedback from our teaching staff, which so far has been incredibly positive.
All right, so they wouldn't necessarily need to be in there, in that room, when a teacher goes in there with a class?
At the CID?
Hmm.
No, they absolutely need to be there.
Why?
So, Mr. Stone is the one who is, he's running the activities that are there, and the teachers are working with small groups. So he's very much in tune with every step of the lesson, from the pre-teaching to the questioning to the analysis at the end, where kids are making connections on their own, and he's facilitating those conversations alongside the classroom teachers. So this isn't a situation where the center could be not staffed, and the kids have the same experience that they've been having.
Not sure, but go ahead.
So first, one quick question. This is at Mary Fritz School,
Correct.
and other schools would come to bring their students there too, not just Mary Fritz or other elementary schools?
Correct. No,
Okay.
every single,
Okay.
this is a common assured experience for every grade level.
Okay.
So, you know, currently, next week, our fifth graders are going over there, and they've logistically worked out the details. So every fifth grade class in the town of Wallingford will have the same assured experience.
Okay, so one last kind of question, comment, I guess, statement. So it's under the strategic enhancement request. This, and I apologize, I missed the presentation when it happened, but just from what I'm gathering here and looking through it, this is truly an enhancement of our curriculum. This is collaboration between teachers and professionals that then goes back and plays out in our curriculum in the classrooms with the students. This is a creative, innovative way, not just for a center, but for students to learn.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, there's several questions. So we're just going to start out at the end of the table. Mr. Ross?
Yeah, first of all, let me say congratulations, because when we first got this inherited, I thought it was a mess, and I never thought they could do it. And they're doing a marvelous job, number one. Number two, logistically, let's just say a junior high, a middle school class goes there for a period, but do they lose half of a period getting there and another half going back to school? How does that work?
Well, there's definitely a lot of logistical details that we work out. And in an opportunity like that, Mr. Ross, which they are working currently with our middle schools to define that for the spring, we know that it takes a little time to get there, to do the activity, and then to get back to school. And in a 50-minute middle school period, there's some overflow there. So what we're trying to do, similar to when our kids go on a field trip, we build in more than one opportunity. So with the students leaving school, they would go over to the CID for their work there, and then we also are building in an experience at the planetarium connected back to curriculum. So it's a half-day experience for them. Then they would go back from lunch and proceed with the rest of their classes. You know, everything that Mr. Stone and Mr. Wasbrock have planned has been closely vetted out with not just the teachers, but the building administrators. We look at the logistics of time in making sure that their school day isn't disrupted, that it is truly a benefit to experience what's happening there. And we work with the teachers to ensure that it's time-wise, it's good timing, that there isn't any blips on the radar of other things that are happening that would make too many disrupted days in a row. So, so far, we've been successful with the logistical planning to that.
Thank you.
Dr. Rasko?
Thank you. So I love the opportunity for our town with the CID. I think it's an incredible opportunity for our students, and even though we sort of inherited this, right, it was set for us part of the way, and now we've inherited it. I think it's a wonderful opportunity, not only for creative learning, but also to build an increased revenue stream. This is the business owner in me. I know Mr. Stone had mentioned that there are other districts interested, and I would love the opportunity to explore that really aggressively, to be able to make this truly self-funding, down the road. Obviously, the work that's been done by Mr. Stone and Mr. Lossbrook to get it going has been amazing. We don't turn a profit overnight, but I love having our Wallingford students being able to use this, but I think it's such an asset, and I would love for Wallingford to stand out because of the CID, and for people to really see it as a destination for learning, and I think we have a real opportunity here. And I'm proud of the work that's been put in, and I'm excited to hopefully push that revenue forward, which will help our budget. Oh, there's my mic.
There it goes.
It wasn't me.
So they have, we've done a lot of work, not to repeat too much of the presentation from before, but we meet weekly, and we have really ensured that the word is out there in terms of our neighboring towns continuing to use a combination of the CID and the planetarium. We hosted last week the STEM contact from the Connecticut State Board of Education, where we held an innovation meeting at the CID, where numerous representatives from other towns were able to come and see the place and see what we offer, which created a lot of really good relationships and partnerships with these other towns. Because we understand and we know very well that we need to look at avenues for revenue building as well. It is a wonderful place for our Wallingford students, who will absolutely always take the highest priority and consideration. But we also have made it a point to advertise and promote as much as possible the different opportunities for kids to come and do a specialized lesson on force and motion, or to go see, I'll get the name wrong, but the crust of the earth or something like that at the planetarium. And it's a better movie than what I made it just sound out. But, we are getting as many community members in through our family nights that we've had to schedule more, because the excitement over coming in and seeing a show and building that connection back to the community that was lost during the pandemic was really important to us. And then, even last summer, when we were newbies at all of this and fresh out of the gate, the interest we had in our summer program was huge, and big enough that we had to add 3 more sessions in August, because we had so many students who wanted to participate in our June and July ones. There is a definite market out there for STEM opportunities for students of varying ages and in varying contexts, whether it's robotics or video gaming or design thinking. Mr. Stone has a real ability to create great opportunities for our kids and get them thinking outside of the box, and getting them excited about science, technology, and engineering and mathematics. So it goes beyond just the curriculum, which is why, as a district, for the teacher salary that we have in enhancements, we're getting a huge bang for our buck there in what we're giving our Wallingford students, but we're also giving to our community and around our community in terms of opportunity. You're welcome.
Yeah, we're just going around. Ms. Passaretti.
Why not, right? Thank you, Ms. Reagan. So I'd like to thank Mrs. Latour and Mr. Stone and Mr. Westrock. I was invited to go to the CID, and this is also a plug for, I hope we get invited to more things in the schools, because whenever we get invited, and I accept every invitation that I get, because when we have something that comes across in our budget book, and we say, Center for Innovation, what in the world is this thing? I love that I was able to see it for myself, and I can now come back to the budget process, and I know what this is. I've seen it in action, and we talked about how the students are engaged, and I got to see it. The teachers are in the room, the students. I watched a student who is learning English, and what a great way to practice English is they're doing something hands-on, they're talking to the students next to them. But the one thing that I saw that you won't find in a budget book is parent engagement. The parents are invited into the CID to do these science experiments with their children. And there were a ton of parents in there, and I loved that. So anyway, kudos to the CID. I support this position in the strategic enhancement budget, and that's all. Thank you.
All right. Is the director position in addition to Mr. Wasbrock and Mr. Stone?
No, so Mr. Wasbrock is the science curriculum coordinator. So his position in the district isn't just CID, he's K-12 science, curriculum articulation, professional development, resource vetting, et cetera, same as our other curriculum coordinators. Mr. Stone currently, through grant funding, is the interim director of the Center for Innovation and Design. That grant funding, similar to our last conversation, is going away in June. So that's why you see that as an enhancement, and it would become more of a permanent position versus just the short contract that he has currently.
Okay. And then they are really, it seems like, the content experts for that area. But it also says that there'll be grant writing responsibilities, which is quite different skill set. It's pretty challenging to be a grant writer and plan for grants. There's quick turnaround time, and then not only that, the burdensome grant reporting, especially if it's federal or state grants. So it seems like that is pretty large. I will always make a pitch that the district needs a grant writer, and I would love to. A grant writer pays for itself. If you pay a grant writer $100,000 or $125,000 and you get one grant, they already pay for themselves. So is there any way for us to separate that out or find any space for a grant writer, because that's a lot for a director?
So I will say that, with the director position, while it's in the teacher contract, and he is planning for classes to come, and he's running logistically all of the other stuff we've talked about this evening. In the past year that he's been in this position, he has done and has experienced quite a bit of it actually in grant writing. And so right now, as much as I agree with you, because Mrs. Turner and I write a lot of grants for this district, there are layers, right, in terms of budget positions. So we felt really getting the director piece solidly in place, because in the times that he sets aside for grant writing, and there's certain cycles for grants that he's aware of through his experience in STEM in all aspects of his life, that he is able to absolutely accommodate I'm going to set this chunk of time aside to write these few grants because these are the due dates, and we're in a decent spot right now. But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah,
I would like just to add, because I know Mr. Stone and I know his experience. He has tremendous experience with grant writing.
Yeah.
So he does have that background. He understands it. He knows about deadlines. Would it be great to have one? Yes. But I would absolutely feel confident that he can, at least until this is a more mature program, do what is necessary to get us to the point, or to make it a self-sustaining. He absolutely has that skill set. And he has contacts at NASA and at the government level. He has contacts all over the place. So he is well aware of the STEM community and where those grants are located.
Yeah, the grant reporting is just sometimes even more
Yeah.
cumbersome. And then lastly, has there been any discussions yet, and I know it's new, about connecting with some of the community programs for after-school programming there, like the Boys and Girls Club, who are interested in STEM and things like that?
Yes, we have been in touch already.
Okay, great, thanks.
Are there any more questions around the CID? The other end, you good? I can't say enough good things about the CID. I think I'm very glad to see it open, and I think that you absolutely have the right people who are in charge of it right now. So I'm looking forward to some bigger things coming from there. All right, moving on from the CID, we did have a question about the E-Hall Pass. I think we did cover that a little bit. So if there are no other questions around the E-Hall Pass in the high schools, the next one is under maintenance on the capital improvement plan. There are several things this year that are marked as requested, while some are unfunded. So I think we answered this question too. We went through the waterfall plan. Is everyone clear as to what ones are unfunded? There's some that are funded, there are some unfunded, and as they come up and we have the 2%, we do have the 2% account. And I do believe that there is going to be a meeting about the capital improvement plan with the mayor as well. So things are moving forward with that. Are there any more questions around that? Mr. Ross?
Yeah, I still have a question about the softball field at Lyman Hall. That has to be moved out of the present position and brought up to the front. I mean, it's a shame.
It's out to bid right now, isn't it? If I'm
No,
not-
it's not out to bid, but it is being requested. The funding
Okay.
is being requested. The fact that in the waterfall plan, it might have been several years out, when we
Yeah.
went through, we identified things we were gonna ask for funding from the town. And it is on that list. That's, I believe, well, we haven't finalized the list, but it's on the
Right.
list that would go to the mayor for funding. Without them funding it, though, then we can't
Right.
move forward.
Thank you.
I mean, I can revise for the probably next ops meeting. I can move it up to show that, to move it up to current. But we did, I believe we flagged it as.
It was on the
yeah, yeah.
list.
And
so-
also, it's on the list. So the list is what's going to the mayor. So
Right.
we are requesting the funding for that.
Thank you.
Question 7 is about the grants. How many of them are we guaranteed? How many, and there's a few questions around that. I do believe that we got the grant update in today's packet, correct? Mr. Daring, you have a question about this?
Thank you. It's just one question. Forgive me if this was already shared and I just missed it. So out of the competitive grants, if we do not receive those grants, what happens to everything we were planning on spending that money on? Are we funding it elsewhere, or do we just postpone that until next school year?
It depends. To be honest with you, it depends. So some of the competitive grants, we would not continue with those items if we did not get awarded. For example, 21st Century is something that if we were not funded, that's a collaboration with Boys and Girls Club, we would not do that. We have received a grant for a trauma specialist. If we did not continue to receive that grant, we would not continue with that position. However, adult education is a competitive grant. We would still need an adult education program, so that's something that we would need to fund. And we would have to come back and figure out how we would do that. But, and I think, Mrs. Latour, that would be it, right? I think the other ones we would continue or we would not fund. Yeah.
So just to be clear, in this budget, we are operating under the assumption that we would be receiving that grant for adult education?
So in this budget, we've already received the funds that we need for next year.
Okay, wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions around grants? If not, the next one was about the increase in advertising, which you addressed. I'm glad to see that we will be increasing our advertising.
I have
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, my microphone's on. I'm just wondering, out of curiosity, if you've used any of the free advertising through the American Job Centers, the Department of Labor. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry, that was a yes. I have to say, yes, we do.
Thank you.
The next question was around the consultants that were paid for the ARP grant, and we did get this, we did touch upon this, and I see your hand, Mr. Votto. I do see what we had. And I did ask about the current consultants, and you said we have a multilingual one for translation, social studies, math, and ELA support, which is the literacy how. Those are not grant funded, correct? Wait a minute. The current set of consultants that we have, which I just butchered, but I did try to list them. I wrote very quickly, apparently. How are those consultants funded?
So it's a combination, most of it's grant funded at this point. And for next year, Mrs. Latour and I have planned to use a combination of board funds and grant funds. However, we significantly reduced the amount of money we're spending on consultants next year. We've really been working to taper those services as we go, and they're really pinpointed to what we need.
That's exactly the answer I was looking for. So we are going to see a decrease.
So I get an A plus?
You do. You get an A plus. So I just want to make sure that I've understood you correctly. So right now, the majority of them are funded through grants. So there are some that are board funded. But as that funding goes away, I should say, next year you will be reducing that, or?
Correct. So
Okay.
we've been, either we've moved them to grants that we have for next year,
Okay.
or we've switched minimal, not much, is in board funds.
Okay. Mr. Votto?
Okay. I would like to know the amounts. You're saying that some of these consultants will stay even without the grant money, correct? Is that what you just said?
Correct.
All right. What I would like to know is what exactly each does, how much we would pay them
Okay.
out of our own budget. You see, I'll tell you where I'm going, okay? I'm going, from what I've listened to tonight, I was totally not in favor of the position for the CID. However, I'm beginning to change my mind about that, but I also think we need to find the funds from other places within our budget right now. That's my feeling, not make it an additional cost. So one of the things I was looking at were the consultants. If it's not going to be paid for by a grant, I want to know how much we're going to take out of our budget to pay for them. And do we indeed need all of these consultants as much as we use them now? I don't know if you got all that.
We did.
And I'm also obviously concerned about instructional coaches, curriculum coordinators, and whatnot. Do we have, I'm sorry if I forget that we have it, curriculum coordinator job description?
Yes.
Yes, for every single one.
We do have
We
that.
already have that?
Yeah.
You should, but we can always put it back in the Friday.
We got it last year.
We
when
did.
in
We
the
sent
last
them-
year's budget
Yes.
Yeah, well, that-
season.
Okay,
So we can put it back in the Friday weekly update, if that's something you'd like.
yeah. Yeah, because I really need to know that, again, because I feel that there are some other positions that perhaps can be combined. And before I make a decision about that, I want to just look at that again, that job description for the curriculum coordinators. And I'm trying to tie that in with the money we spend on these consultants. And exactly what they do as well. I think that's it for now.
Dr. Reed?
I just wanted to add on to that, in that I was wondering if with the ones that are board-funded, the consultants, and we talked about this last meeting a little bit, the consultants are put in for a time period and then we fly on our own. I was wondering if you could give us if you're asking Mr. Votto for the consultants we currently have that are board-funded, could we have kind of like a timeline of when you think we would be?
So you want us to outline the tapering of those?
Could you do that, please?
Yes,
That's
we
a
can.
good way to put that. Thank you.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Are there any more questions around the consultants? If not, the next question was around the increase of 3 positions and 3 that were moved from the ARP grant. That was my question. And I think it was all based on enrollment, so there's really not much we can do about that. Enrollment is what it is. So my next question was around the $190,000 for instructional software. Though I think, is there one piece of software that accounts for most of it? It comes from software that was utilized in educational recovery efforts from the pandemic that is not covered in the grant. So the bulk of this is because it's coming off from grant funding.
Correct.
What is this? What is the software?
We used COVID funding for a lot of software, so it's a combination.
Okay.
That increase mostly is from iReady.
iReady?
Yep. At least for my lines. Because it's moving into the sustained budget off the grant. And that is our universal screen software for literacy and mathematics for K through 8. We use it 3 times a year. And in addition to the universal screen aspect of it, there is a practice component where our students use it daily, which is adaptive to their own individual needs in reading and in mathematics.
And I would assume that the iReady is a part of our reading program, or?
No.
Well, it's not curriculum-based, but
Right.
it would support it.
It absolutely supports it. So based on how the students perform in the diagnostic that they take 3 times a year, it looks at the child's strengths and weaknesses and gives them practice in the areas that aren't as solid as we would want them to be. It adapts to each individual child to provide practice in the areas of, it could be vocabulary, it could be informational text, fictional text, phonics, algebra, geometry, measurement, so depending on the child and where they are. So in our WIN blocks, which we have K through 8, which is a time period in which students are doing what they need, this is a component that students can work on independently if they're not in a small group with their teacher.
Thank you. Mr. Votto?
A quick question on the previous one. Where you say it moved from ARP grant, that means we don't have that? We don't have those positions anymore?
No, we have the positions, we don't have the grant anymore, so it has to go into the sustained budget. So we had the preschool coordinator and 2 middle school interventionists in the ARP grant, their salaries.
So now we're paying for those.
Correct.
Those are moved to sustained.
That has been moved already? It's in that sustained budget?
For next year, yes.
For next year.
Yeah. Okay.
Are there any other questions? Go ahead.
Prior to the ARP grants, did those positions exist?
At the preschool coordinator.
Preschool coordinator did not.
Okay.
And the middle school interventionist that you see on there, we had, still do, middle school interventionists that were in existence before the ARP grant. We added more due to the academic needs of the middle school students at the time.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any more questions? I'm sorry, I kind of glossed over that one, and I didn't ask anyone else if they had any questions. All right, so that was, we covered 10 and 11. Number 12, is there an assumption for wage increases for all the upcoming contract negotiations? And there is, and that's 1.99. Is it 1.99 or is it?
So it's an estimate.
Okay.
For general wage increases, because we didn't negotiate
Right.
them yet, so we're not sure.
Understood.
Yep. And it's for 5 contracts, because we have 5 contracts that are up this spring.
Mrs. Raines?
Yes, I have a question about that one. It kind of links to another one as well under business. Last meeting, we had talked about, there were a couple positions where we had mentioned that the benefits were also budgeted into them at 15%. And I was just wondering if you knew what that 15% broke down to, if it was mostly healthcare, the medical.
Oh, I'm sorry. The 15% is health insurance.
It's all medical?
It's all health insurance.
Okay.
So we meet with, we're in a pool with the town and.
That leads to
and-
my next question.
Okay, but, yeah, so so can I just explain where that comes from?
Sure,
We're
please.
in the pool with the town. We have an insurance consultant that looks at our claim history, and then they come up with a rate. And,
Okay.
you know, the rate is the trend plus or minus whether we have to, you know, we need a reserve to be able to meet, you know, if things go one way or another. So that's how it's made up. And it will likely be revised in probably April, maybe March. So it could change.
Thank you.
It will probably change.
And my question that kind of piggybacks off of this question is, do you have the opportunity for the medical, for the town? Are you part of the CT partnership for your medical? Are you only able to negotiate the medical insurance with other town employees, or do you utilize the opportunity to negotiate the plan for those towns that are involved in the state plan?
We do not right now participate in the CT partnership. I guess we could look into that, and we've also had questions whether we can look at putting together a
Right.
consortium of other school districts or municipalities. But, you know, the challenge with that is we have so many bargaining unit agreements that are in place, that are gonna be in place for the next couple of years. We have to look at, you know, if we could do it, you know, based on that, and also, I guess, if we can pull away from the town, or part of us can pull away. There's a lot of different pieces into that question.
Thank you so much.
Are there any other questions around the wages and the insurance? The next question is around required numbers of hours for professional development, which is at 18. Do you know how many hours of PD do we currently provide? I'm going to
If
assume
you come
it's
back
about-
to me, I'll do the math.
All right, I'll come back to that. Are there any other questions around that? Well, we can come back to that one. Mrs. Reyes?
Yes, I was just wondering if this was for, if this included your paraprofessionals as well. Is there a requirement for them to, and what that requirement is?
So it's 18 hours for them as well. That's new. And so we had to account for that as well. You're welcome.
Daily schedule for elementary instructional coaches. There is an answer here. Did anyone want to follow up on that?
The only thing I didn't see in here was sort of the question I asked earlier around small group work. I didn't see that as part of the answer. Was that just accidentally left out, or is this a different answer for elementary?
Are you asking if the coaches do small group work?
Yes.
So the coaches are working with our teachers. So they'll model a small group, or they'll observe a teacher doing a small group, depending on what the focus is that they're working on. So all of our teachers do small group instruction, as we talked about a little bit ago. Our instructional coaches are working with our adults to build capacity in the other areas of teaching and learning, right? So in the course of their work with the classroom teachers, regardless of the level, they are modeling small group instruction, but they are not the sole providers of small group instruction for students within the classroom.
Okay, so what we were talking about earlier, the instructional support teachers are separate from the instructional coaches,
No,
right? No?
they're not.
Okay, I'm totally
So I know.
It took
you
us a
know,
long time to understand.
It did. So the quick story, which I'm not even sure I'm capable of anything quick today in my answers. the quick story is, because those were special teachers on assignment, we had to kind of change up the name because of contract and union things. So we called them instructional support specialists. They are very much in the same capacity, instructional coaches working with our teachers, just under a different title because it was a grant-funded temporary position.
But those are the ones previously you said do small group instruction.
So they do it in the same capacity our instructional support teachers do it.
Okay, so
Through
just
modeling.
modeling it for the teachers not doing, so if there's like, say, I don't know, 2 or 3 students that are struggling with something particular, the teacher does the small group, but I'm just wondering, like, does the instructional coach take the small group while the teacher teaches the other, I don't know, 17 kids, 15 kids, and then the instructional coaches take the 3 that are struggling?
So that's, they can if they're modeling it, yeah, but it's not a regular, like, I'm scheduled to go into Mrs. Versace's class every day at 1 o'clock to
Yeah.
take a small group. No, that's not happening. That's
Okay,
not their
that's
role.
not part of what their role is.
That
Is
is
there
not their
anyone
role.
that serves in that role?
Intervention does, but in a different capacity, not always within the classroom. They're more pull out.
Okay.
But it depends. You might see a multilingual teacher doing that. You may see a special education teacher doing that. You may see an interventionist doing that. You may see another teacher within the building who has a period without students doing that as push-in, as some of our special area or encore teachers are in during one of their teaching blocks, they don't have a full case load of students. So the coach's role is very much as a support to the instruction, to the teaching, to the strategies, to the data analysis or the assessment piece of it. So they are working with students, but they're more in a role that's supportive of the teacher and how to most effectively do that and manage that. So it's not something, Mrs. Versace, that you could always count on a Monday at 1 o'clock. This person's going to show up and take a group.
Pull the 3 kids.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Votto?
See, it's always been my interpretation that the coach was there to support the teacher and really not sit there in a small group and teach children unless they were modeling for the teacher. Correct. Okay, so I clarified that. Now, are the instructional leaders in the high school sort of doing the same thing?
Yeah, the instructional leaders have.
I ask these same
I
questions every
know.
year, I know.
You know, it doesn't help that we have a different title for everything.
Yeah, that's what's confusing.
The instructional leaders, when we shifted to that a couple of years ago, away from the department head model into instructional leaders, they kind of, they have a multifaceted job, right? They are still doing a lot of the department leader responsibilities in terms of management, of instructional resources, of scheduling, of budgeting, running department meetings. But they are also very much in the coaching role. So as we consider the vast needs of classroom teachers meeting the wide variety of ability levels within their class, changing curriculum, assessment, filling achievement gaps, our instructional coaches / leaders, depending on what level you are a support to that teacher and how to plan most effectively for those students. So our high school instructional leaders do it, our middle school instructional coaches do it, and our elementary instructional coaches do it. And it has been very widely used by many, many teachers within our buildings on a variety of different topics. So the instructional coach or leader isn't going to work on the same thing with every teacher from that grade level or from that department. It is very nuanced and specific to what the teacher needs. So if I were to request a coaching cycle because I'm struggling with small group instruction, that's where I'm going to sit down and create a plan with the instructional coach to help me. These are my kids. This is what my data is showing. Here are how I have formatted my groups. I'm finding that I'm running too long, I'm not getting to all my groups, I'm struggling with that small, like, snippet piece or mini lesson piece, and that coach is helping me through observation, through modeling, and through lesson debriefing. It could be that a teacher is looking for assistance on the teaching of equivalent fractions, because, you know, she's struggling in getting her students to understand what that looks like. So she's working with the coach in the curriculum. And then they're creating a lesson together so that they can best meet the needs of the students. So it's really hard to pinpoint and say with certainty, this is what the instructional coach does, because it is different with every single teacher they work with, because it's very much driven by what that classroom teacher needs or desires in terms of refining their planning or their instruction or their assessment or how they're viewing their data.
Well, see, it seems that the high school, the instructional leaders really have a really different role than the others in the lower grades to me, because they're
Their
taking
role
on-
is a lot more diverse, I'll say that. You know, they have a lot of, they have more on their plate to do because they're managing
They're
the,
not just coaching.
correct. They're managing the department like a true department head would. Scheduling and meeting with parents and, you know, all of that
They
stuff.
observe teachers too, don't they? Not evaluate, but observe
So
and share.
they do absolutely observe, and they may be called in with, you know, as we talked about when we changed that policy, with the building principals to observe a teacher within their department and provide context. Absolutely. They're not doing the official rating or evaluation, but they are providing support to the building administrator.
Do the curriculum coordinators assist them?
The instructional leaders or the principals?
Both.
Yeah. So, you know, I'll take math for a minute. You know, we have a math consultant that's in the budget. Christy Medancy will work with the math consultant, and Patrick Hubany, our instructional leader. They create the schedule. They work with the teachers to find out what their needs are in conjunction with this consultant. And they run the day. So when our consultant is in district, they're either doing model lessons and lesson demos, they're doing observations in classrooms and debriefing with teachers afterwards. And then they are, they're at times are joined by the building principal, other times, depending on what's happening in the building, the principal can't get away. And they are the ones, you know, leading that work with the consultant, with the department.
Thank you.
I know you, oh,
No, go
sorry.
ahead.
We made eye contact. I know you said earlier you would include titles. I'm just thinking moving forward as numbers, you know, as we look at things even beyond, maybe for the new board members, it would be good to have all of these things defined for us, them, everyone. Okay, thanks.
We can do that.
Are there any more questions around the coaching positions? Let's move on to question 15, which is the follow-up plan when DESA assessments identify, what is the follow-up plan when DESA assessments identify areas of need for students, both internal and external with parents? I know I have a comment about this, but does anyone else have any questions around the DESA assessments?
I think this is a good program.
Right, I would agree, and I think it's very important, and it gives us a good, I think it gives us a good indication of the social and emotional needs. Are the DESA results, I guess, one, are they made available to us so that we could see what's going on? And I don't mean down to the individual students, but is there a grouping of them? Like, this is the general welfare that we're seeing. Are there trends that are being identified with each of the DESA testings?
Yes, we can provide that information for you. We get a district point of view, there you go,
Right.
of data, and we can show you that. The trends over the years actually show that it's improving a little bit, so it's good data that we've seen.
I just think from a board view, it's nice to see so that we can see exactly where the needles are being moved, right? Is it getting better? Are there areas of need, you know, to try and support that as much as possible?
Absolutely.
Do we
Go ahead.
compare that with the health survey?
So, Mr. Votto, it's difficult to compare it to the health survey just because it's different categories, right? So the health survey is more at-risk behaviors, and the DESA is really looking at the internal social emotional needs of a student. Additionally, we don't do it at the high school level. We found, I don't know if you remember, it was a while ago, when we did it at the high school level, our staff and our students had found that it was not a good predictor of their, where they were. Since then, they have revised it, but we have something else that we've been using with them. It's called Rethink Ed. So we've been looking at that piece for the secondary students that's a little bit more in-depth, and it gives us a little better view of what we need to do to support them.
Do you have any data on how frequently sort of you are, trying to contact parents that maybe their kids have been identified as at risk and maybe there isn't a follow through, and then how does that affect, how they're in the classroom and whether 211 needs to be called, or, what is the response from parents where kids are identified as at risk? And what are the engagement strategies, I guess?
So in terms of data specifically to that, I don't have that off the top of my head. I could ask my providers. I will say that our response to the parents that we were struggling to provide support to, or those hesitant to have school personnel provide that support, that is when we brought CBH in to provide those in-school private services to kind of make that divide. So that is one of the strategies that's actually been very successful in there. So I can get you some information to include in the Friday update in terms of what our engagement is and what that success rate has been.
That's great. And is there, I'm only a little bit familiar with the DESA, but is there anything on the DESA identified related to like the social determinants of health and any need based in that way?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then do we have anything to address social determinants of health? Like, is there something separate? Is there anything related to like care coordination for families? Anything that's like non-clinical responses?
So it really varies on the individual child and the extent of the needs. So when we first do that and we first look at identify the children in need, I would say to you about 70% of them are already receiving support. So right off the top, we've already done all of that work. For the other students, we really look at first doing an initial support, so kind of like a tier 1, going into the classroom, giving the whole class that, then pulling them into small groups, and then if there's even more need, that's really when we're looking at, okay, are there accommodation plans that we need to put in place? Are there specific in-school counseling supports needed? So it really varies on the individual child and what their individual needs are. We do a lot of planning with families. We do a lot of in-school planning in terms of who we need to support, grouping students together, providing some typical peer groupings, because especially with social skills, you really need a role model. So our staff works really diligently on that piece.
Great.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. I mean, I was also thinking about just, if kids need, I don't know, sometimes kids don't come to school because they don't have clean clothes. And how are we how are we assessing and sort of helping to address those pieces, or, hunger, or,
Of course.
things that are more social determinant?
For those of the board members who were here last year, they'll remember that Mrs. Latour and I did a wonderful shopping spree last year. We had so much fun. Our social workers do a really good job of identifying those families in need. And we are using a combination of grant funding as well as our district funding to provide students with clothing, with food. We have an account with ShopRite. And when I have a counselor that reach out and says, hey, so-and-so's family is unable to feed their family this weekend, can I go food shopping? We do provide them with supports that way. We have a really great relationship with Youth and Family Services, as well as Master Manna and Boys and Girls Club, really providing some backpacks, And when I say backpack, it's a backpack of food for them to take home for the weekend. We have a lot of, families that do reach out. All of our schools were provided with a significant amount of clothing. So we have clothing banks within our schools, as well as they're able to go to Master Manna, which has actually an entire storefront, right? So we do that. In both of our middle schools and both of our high schools, we actually have discrete, actually, the opposite of indiscreet, discrete supply funds. So there's, if you can picture a shoe pocket, we have one of those hanging up where they can get pens, pencils, notebooks, granola bars, female hygiene products, any of those things that they may need, they could just walk right into the office and get. And we have some washers and dryers at our schools for them. So we actually have a lot of things. It's really, what we run into more often than not having the ability to provide it is having families accept the support that we want to provide.
Yeah.
The other thing I didn't mention is we have Uber cards at all of our schools. So for a family that is unable to provide transportation, or to get to a doctor, or to get to school to pick up a child, we have some funds for them to call Uber for the family to do that. So we are providing a lot. It's just really getting them to access those.
Yeah, all right, thank you.
First, I wanted to say thank you, because I'm not sure the public always knows everything that we do. So I really appreciate that explanation, even though it's not, directly related to budget, although those things cost money. So I appreciate that. And I'm sure through your truancy process because most of the things you're talking about, students will be truant because of these things. So I'm sure through that process, you discover who these, people in need are, and you follow through with it. So I really appreciate that. Just a comment.
Thank you.
Mr. Votto?
Ditto, ditto, ditto. I really think, I'm sure most people in the community don't realize that we do those things. And so it was a perfect opportunity for you to say all that.
I also don't think they realize how needy our community is at times, and I think it's
Say that
really.
again?
I don't think we realize how needy some of our families
right.
are at
They don't.
times also, and I think that's
Yeah.
important to bring up.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for everything. Are there any more questions around that particular topic? If not, we will move on to number 17, which I think we've already covered, which are what teachers that are moving from the COVID relief to the sustained budget. We know that's a preschool coordinator and 2 middle school interventionists. Are there any, if there's no other questions, I'm just going to keep moving along, because the next one is the sidewalk question, which is like a thorn in our side over here. So the sidewalks do need repair, and you are asking that to be covered by the town this year, correct?
Correct. That is one of the items we did flag under the capital items. So that is one of the items we'll ask for funding for.
Okay.
How about paving? That too. While we're at it. I went to Parker Farms, and that parking lot, grass growing through it, and it's just disgusting. Maybe you can ask that too.
I can, yes. So I'm sure it's on our capital plan, it's on our 10-year plan. And so I think the list we came up with for now are the ones we flagged as the most pertinent. But it, again, like we talked about last time, there are so many that are coming to the surface that it's hard because, again, I feel like we're reactive to a lot of things, and so that makes it a little more challenging to prioritize. And so we created this list based on what we have and based on what we know. But then, again, things come up, as they did Friday, that force, our staff to go in different directions to troubleshoot things. So I think we're also on borrowed time with some of these items.
And just to remind everyone, on your budget book on page 44, actually it's the page 44 of the presentation, the capital items that are being requested are outlined there, so we know what those are. All right, so I think that answers all the ones that were documented, but I would like to open it up, because I know that there are additional questions there will be. So Dr. Reed.
Okay, I just have a couple questions. One, if there are any classes in the district that are above the size guidelines, would you be able to let us know about that?
Yes, so what we try and do is stay within the guidelines as best we can. And so depending, we do have some classes that may be one student over, depending on when the students come in, depending on the timing of things. And so it makes it a little challenging to then go ahead and add another classroom teacher if it's at an elementary level when they're already established. And so we do try to do the best that we can, depending, to make sure that we stay within those guidelines. You know, the K2 at 21, and then grades 3 through 5 at 23 students, and then grades 6 through 12 at 25, where we can. We do have a few that are over. We can pull up in a minute the specifics if you wanted the specific numbers. We do have a few, but again, it varies on what it is, on what classes it is.
And most of it is circumstances that are really kind of beyond your control once classes are set and
Correct.
kids are added in or things like that.
Correct,
Okay.
and when new students move in and their classes that they have to have, or there's multiple students requesting, and depending on the level, they'd prefer to have them in the class than tell them no, because it's only one student over. So there's a lot of variables when we go through. It is a conversation we continue to have with our building administrators when they look at it, especially at the elementary level. We're constantly looking at the numbers over the summer when new enrollments come in and trying to adjust the best we can. And they're judgment decisions. We do the best we can with what we have moving forward.
Okay. Another question. In terms of both specifically high schools, I'll go for the concept of math lab. Is that something that we're able to offer to our students who are struggling, you know, as consistently as possible, as often as possible? And that, I know it has to do with scheduling and, you know, who we have available, but if you could just
So we have a math lab currently for our Algebra 1 students for 9th grade. It's specifically connected to the Algebra 1 course. And the students who are recommended for the lab part, which means they have 2 math credits their freshman year, are recommended through teacher recommendations and counselor recommendations as 8th graders going into 9th grade. Over the years, we have been able to isolate particular periods within the day, different at each high school. If there was a hanging FTE to keep the teacher whole, we would establish that teacher as a math lab teacher for period 4A. Students would be notified so that they could have drop-in math support regardless of the course that they were taking. You know, we have a full-time math interventionist at each high school for those students who are scheduled into intervention. But the math lab piece has been flexible, other than the algebra lab that we run, and dependent on, you know, how much time and a teacher schedule we have available to us. We don't have a permanent full-time teacher assigned to a math lab.
I think it would be accurate to say, to the best of your ability, you house the math lab with a certified teacher when you can,
Correct.
based on scheduling.
Correct.
Okay. And one last question is, just gonna touch base on the in terms of the budget for music. Over the years, how has that evolutionized, de-evolutionized? Has it increased? Has it decreased? Is there less of a need? Could you just talk a little bit about that music budget, please?
So, you know, when you talk about the budget, you know, it's hard to pinpoint exactly. The buildings craft their budget based on what teachers submit as needs to them. Curricularly, we budget for new items needed through the rewriting of curriculum or for bigger purchases. And then the staffing piece of music is enrollment driven. So, so that's kind of where it's landed.
So it really comes from the buildings share
They
with
have,
you what
you
they
know,
need.
they allocate money to the departments, unless it's a big thing, like a tuba costs a lot of money. You're never gonna put that in a building budget. That would come separately.
Okay. All right.
And so depending on what the need is the funding source for those
Okay.
things.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? I know I have one, and this one is going to be directed toward Mr. Deptula. Since there was a big part of our budget that was used for the Sheehan Field renovation, How's that Sheehan Field? I know that we had a lot of rain over the last few days. Have we seen an improvement in the field conditions?
We have. There's been no flooding, there's been no standing water. The amount of rain that we got may have not been significant, but we did have snow and ice in the ground, and that thawed along with these rainstorms. So the clog that we found was on the north east outlet. That drains to the wetlands, so we cleared that. That seemed to be a major issue. We're still looking at the northwest outlet to the wetlands. Tomorrow, a vendor's coming in to take a closer look at that. That's a 36-inch pipe that connects one wetland to another, and in turn, the field drainage ties into that same pipe. So we're just going to make sure that's clear. The wetlands will need some work in the future, but we should have resolved these problems for the time being. To address those wetlands issues in the future, it'll probably be a summer job when things have dried out. It's really impossible to get any kind of equipment or anything in there right now. But once we finish doing our due diligence, we will ask the architect for recommendations. He's going to provide us with something that we could submit to inland wetlands. So if it comes to the point where we need to proceed into those wetlands to clean up the silt, we have something in place.
Thank you. Mr. Ross?
Yeah, I had a question on music.
I'm sorry, go
That's
ahead.
all right. At Lyman Hall, are we down to just one music person running the band and the choir and everything? And is it planned on hiring some more people in there, or what?
So currently at Lyman Hall, we have one full-time music teacher. Those decisions were made, the reduction of the halftime from last year was made because enrollment-wise, there wasn't enough kids to run enough classes for more than one music teacher. So everything we do is enrollment-driven in terms of looking at our course recommendations and the requests that go forward. We're starting that within the next week. We start with our juniors going into our rising seniors and all the way through. And at that point, as we see how many kids are enrolling in the different classes, we'll make our recommendations for how many staff members we need to teach the different courses. Music has been hit particularly hard from the COVID pandemic. When we look at the last several years, there was, beginning in 2021, the 21-22, and part of the 22-23, a lot of disruption to music in particular in terms of playing of instruments and singing, masks, no masks, how much air ventilation, et cetera. And it really did do harm to those two programs. But in looking at our middle school numbers and looking at, in particular, our 6th grade going into 7th grade, our numbers are back full force. So there's been a dip. I don't foresee it as being something that's a permanent dip. And, you know, I think the Lyman Hall music teacher and Sheehan as well they're doing a phenomenal job with outreach down to the middle schools about what it's like in high school band, chorus, and strings, and really fostering a lot of enthusiasm and excitement. So we'll see kind of where our numbers are in the spring with course requests.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Reynes?
Hi, yes, I have a question in regard to support staff and the list that I see here on page 15 of section 3. I'm just wondering if this list is your strategic enhancement request for these positions, if this is exhaustive because we're trying to be frugal, or if there are other positions that would be on this list. Something like building substitutes or clerical staff that might be needed. Is that in a different place in the budget? Is that a need? Are there other positions that we need that aren't showing because we're trying to be as economical as possible?
These are the ones that have come through that either central office has identified or through our budget process meeting with our building administrators that have been identified. In terms of the building subs, that's through the personnel department, so we're always looking for building subs. That would not be something that's listed here. That is something we account for. We increase the daily rate for that, so that's in a separate, we're always looking for building subs. In terms of the positions here that we're looking to add to the sustained budget, these are the ones that were requested. So these are the ones we've discussed with our building administrators. We've discussed it at central office. And at this time, these are the ones we're putting forward as a need.
And that is our next budget item. That is our next agenda item, is to discuss the sustained and strategic. So we will be going a little further into depth in some of those sustained and some strategic requests.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions before we move on? Oh, Mr. Votto.
How are we doing with the sub? How are we doing with the sub issue right now?
So I would say, we're still seeing that we have a shortage. Even with the increase in the daily rate, our college students did go back. So prior to them going back, we were doing really well with maybe only having 1 or 2 openings or maybe 4 openings, but now we're seeing the trend increase where we're up higher and an increase in the number of openings that we have, and some positions are not filled. And so we do have the paraeducator MOU, and so our building administrators are taking a look at that and making sure obviously student needs are met first. But if there are instructional paraeducators, or if a student is not in that day and we can use a special education paraeducator, then those are the things they're working with at the building level to use our paraeducators to help sub for the day and cover the
And we do have some
classrooms.
building subs, don't we?
We do have building
But
subs.
not in every school.
We do have them in every school now.
Are they in every school
correct,
now?
Dr. Thompson? And we have interns throughout the district as well. I know there's some of them student teach, and so that pulls them offline for a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
But we do have interns as well that can help support.
Okay. This might sound like a foolish question, but what is an ISS coach? ISS to me means something different, I believe.
Oh, sorry.
Instructional support specialist.
That's
The
the
4
4
grant-funded
positions. Oh, that's the 4?
positions.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, okay, that's an easy one then.
I feel like I'll make you a little cheat sheet with all the
I-
aliases
I
to
look
this
at ISS
particular.
and I think of
Absolutely,
in-school
In-school
suspension.
suspension, yes. No, we
No,
don't need a
that's-
coach for in-school suspension. Instructional support specialist.
And I'm sure you haven't, money is hard, but do we have any type, have we thought about perhaps the mentorship for administrators? I don't know how we can do this without spending a lot more money, maybe just need subs, but I think, I was hoping to see something where we would start some type of a program where a teacher who has an 092 and might want to become an administrator here in town, to do some kind of mentorship with a principal, but that would mean getting a sub for that teacher, or maybe even a half-day kind of thing. I don't know, I just thought I'd throw that out there. don't
No,
know
I
if
think
this
it's
is the
an,
time.
I think it's an excellent idea, and typically the way we've had an opportunity to grow our own staff, whether it's the instructional support teachers, which was a piece of, having the grant funding, being able to do that and afford people an opportunity to grow and try something different. We've had an opportunity, while not as grand, to allow that for some of our teaching staff that have an 092 that want to fill in as a sub or long-term sub for someone who may be out. But other than that, at this time, we don't have a direct mentorship. To your point, Mr. Votto, I mean, it's a great opportunity, but then it's something that we'd have to consider funding to cover that teacher for that time while that person is assisting and gaining the experience. Very valuable. Just in this time, we didn't add something like that to the budget right now.
Do you think a teacher who is in that situation, has an 092 and looking forward to becoming an administrator, would they be, if we offered to them, during a preparation period, during this free time that you might have on Tuesday, would you like to shadow the principal for a day? Would that be open to them to do that?
Sure, if
know.
that's something they're interested in and they would like to shadow the principal, absolutely. There's always those opportunities for them to be able to do that. It's just dependent on what their interest is and if that's something they're interested in doing.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mrs. Passaretti?
Thank you. Superintendent Blizzy, I just want to ask a question to help me understand the building subs. We have at least one building sub per school, right? And if someone were to say, why didn't you increase the budget to allow for more building subs? It sounds like that's not the issue. The issue is that not enough people want to be building subs. Do I have that correct?
So we have, and Dr. Thompson, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have building subs assigned to each building. So there's two different things. We have a building sub that's assigned, let's just say, to Pond Hill, so that person reports to Pond Hill every single day. And we have one at every one of our schools. In addition, we have daily building subs, which means that the system will automatically call them if there's a position that's open. So our daily building subs can choose which schools they want to be at through the system, whether they only want to work, I'm making this up, at the K2 level, or they want to work only at the 3-5 level, or they can identify only what school they want to work at, which gives them some flexibility depending on their schedule outside of subbing. So that's what we call like the daily building sub. They'll pick up the job today, but they may not work every single day. They may only check off certain days a week that are good for them. So we may have a large pool of subs, but they may not work every single day, aside from our daily building sub that automatically reports to a specific school, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and is that a position that's
That's
part of the-
accounted for in our sub accounts.
okay? Thank you.
Yep.
Are there any more questions before we move on to the next part of the agenda? No. So we will move on to the next part of our agenda, which is the review of the sustained services and strategic budget. So am I turning that over? Are there any, are we opening it up for questions specific to the line items in there? Because I know I do have questions around some of the strategic items, but are there any other questions specific to any line items in the sustained budget, which is currently at 120 million is where we are, I think? Hold on.
6 point something, or 5.8?
Right, 400. That's 5.863%. Does anyone have any questions with regards specifically to that sustained number? No. Okay, that's what we went through on Thursday. So moving on to the strategic part of it. So the strategic part is the, well, this is kind of like the wish list. And I would like to, so I know that with strategic, we are, or with the budget, we are asking for a pot of money. So I would say, in reviewing things, I'm going to go back to my previous statement from last week, is that I have a hard time with the 4 instructional coaches, because that is 42% of the request of the 804,000. It's almost half of it, and I just feel like that we could use those funds for other positions, which I think are equally important. One of the questions I had is, we have on here for a school psychologist and a part-time social worker. How many psychologists do we have? What is I guess I'm trying to formulate my question. What are the mental health services and positions available at the schools? Like, do we have a psychologist at every school? Do we have a social worker at every school? What is that breakdown look like?
We have a school psychologist and a social worker in every school building. We have 2 at Lyman Hall and 2 at Sheehan, based on the size. I'm sorry, I should clarify that. We have 2 school psychologists at Lyman Hall, 2 school psychologists at Sheehan, 2 social workers at Lyman Hall. We also have our specialized programs. So for our WISE and arts programs, which are for our socially, emotionally disabled students, we have a social worker for those programs. And we have a psychologist and social worker for our arts programs at the high school. That's it.
And where would the full-time school psychologist be going? I see that it's district, is that would be a floating position, meaning they would cover all the schools where there are gaps?
So the school psychologist would do a combination of things. What we're seeing is we have a lot of testing. So a school psychologist is responsible for all the psychoeducational testing for our students that are in magnet schools and out-of-district placements who require evaluations. Our school psychologists that are in the buildings have to conduct those evaluations. So this is a position that we had previously. So we had it not last year, but the year before. It is something that we're finding our staff is really struggling with trying to uphold the legal timelines required for those evaluations because we have so many mental health needs. So not only are they doing crisis and interventions all day for the mental health needs, they have to do the educational testing, which takes a very long time. And for the magnet schools and the out-of-district placements, they have to travel to those schools. So that's a lot of travel time in addition. So this individual would conduct those evaluations. They would support any of the school psychologists that need extra support. And what we're finding is that our ag program, the students who are coming from out-of-district towns, they're requiring a lot of socio-emotional support in addition. So this individual would be providing support to Lyman Hall for those ag students.
Thank you. I have another question on this list. I also see a part-time health office assistant for Pond Hill. All the schools have a part-time office assistant. Why would that be in a strategic, and why wouldn't we just put that in the sustained if all schools have one?
Because it's an add to the budget, so I wanted to put it here, because it's an additional request.
Because I would think that we would want to add that for equity of all the schools.
Correct, and so that's why we're adding it here. So they have one right now, it's grant funded, and so this would be something that, since there's no longer the grant, it's also a position here that would need to be an add to the.
But some of the grant-funded positions have moved to sustained anyway. Why would this not move to sustained?
It was just a decision we made to not do that. So for years, we've been asking for it through the strategic, so we follow the same process. I understand where you're coming from that way. I can see it both ways. I think for me, because it was an ad, so that's why I placed it here, to add it as an add to Pond Hill as the part-time health office assistant.
Just in my opinion, I think it should be part of the sustained budget. If every school has one and they do not, and it's coming off from the grant funding, and it should be moved into sustained because it would give equity among all the schools. That's just my personal 2 cents. I would rather see that under sustained and not under strategic. I don't know what anyone else thinks about that. Does anyone else disagree with moving that $9,991 into the sustained budget?
No, I agree.
All right, Mr. Barone, can you please remove the part-time health office assistant from the strategic and move that into the sustained budget, please? Thank you. Which will change our number, obviously, but by $1,000. Mr. Votto.
You mentioned before that, I can't think of his name now, Chris, Mr. Stone, is presently the interim director there?
Yes,
But he's a teacher in our system.
correct.
So how is that working?
That is working because the person who is taking his spot in the classroom is on a 1-year contract.
Okay.
So we would be
Yeah, similar to what we did with the instructional support specialist, when we pulled our staff out of their classroom,
Right.
we hired a replacement and kept them at a one-year contract so that it was very clear that this was a short-term assignment.
And is his pay the same as if he were still teaching in the classroom?
He's on the teacher's contract, yes.
He's on the teacher's contract?
Yep.
Would this move that?
No.
No. And his pay would be similar to what he has now, this 84,000?
So this 84,000 is an estimate of Masters plus 5.
Of what?
Plus benefits. Masters plus 5, which is what we always use whenever we're adding a position. His salary would stay the same. His salary would not change.
All right.
But remember, yeah. So, yes.
Could we benefit by having somebody in there half-time, part-time instead of full-time?
I don't see how that would work, to be honest. Because the job itself is really, it's a full-time job, because it's not just, remember, it's not just the times where the kids are coming during the school day. It's also after-school things, it's nighttime things, it's summer things. So, in the times that the students are not at the center, it is planning, prep, partnerships with other districts. Other districts are coming to our center or to our planetarium. So, you know, it is a very active position.
You know, I look at these things, and generally speaking, we're at 5.8, correct? 5.863%. If we were to add these things, Dom, and it was 6, do you know off the top of your head?
No, but I could look at it.
All right.
6.572.
Okay.
Did you say total vote, right?
If we added all the strategic? Yeah, okay. This is always a tough one. Mrs. Turner, I missed what you said about full-time school psychologists. What do we have right now? Full-time? Do we have?
Including specialized programs? I have to do the math in my head. Give me 1 second.
There's one at each school. There's a guaranteed one.
So there's 12,
There are-
13, 14, 15, 16, 17.
School psychologists, full-time?
Correct, correct.
Okay. And, okay. And where would the school nurse be?
Lyman Hall?
Lyman Hall, we're losing somebody there?
No, they're requesting an additional nurse based on the population, the number of students they have. When the ASTE students or the VOAG students come in, that's a lot from the outside, so it's like starting all over again. So it's a lot there.
They have one now?
They have one, and they have health office assistants there.
How many school nurses does Sheehan have?
One.
And you know, I really feel we need didn't we also, this assistant to buildings and grounds, that was on the plan last year, correct?
Yes, it was.
And we.
Yes.
And we did not okay that. I think that's an important one too, because Mark really needs some help in there. I would consider that if it was at least half-time out of all of these. Oh, I guess I have to do the Center for Innovation Design too, right? Okay. All right, I'm just thinking out loud. Sorry, go ahead. I'm done.
Mr. Roth? Oh, I'm sorry, Karen, Mrs. Rain is.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry, I just want to. I don't know if this is, okay, here we go. Just for my own clarification, so this $84,000 is no increase in his pay? And he's doing all this extra work and over the summer, and that's
No.
It's the placeholder for
Oh,
a
okay.
classroom teacher.
It's
We
a backfill
use
for his position.
a standard salary line for a
Okay.
replacement teacher. It's a master's plus 5 on the salary scale.
Okay, okay.
So, plus
Thank you.
benefits.
Just looking.
Mr. Ross?
Yeah, I certainly hope Mr. Stone is going to be a regular teacher soon, rather than an interim teacher. How long does this last as an interim?
So he is considered, he's considered a regular teacher. He does not lose his seniority or anything within the teacher's contract. He's on a one-year special assignment to be the director at the center right now. So if this position is not fulfilled, then he goes back to the current position that he had prior to this year, which is a classroom teacher at Pond Hill. But he's on a one-year special assignment, which is grant-funded, so we moved him to this one-year special assignment, and there's a substitute in there's a one-year contract teacher in his current position at Pond Hill. If this does not go through into the budget and we don't add it into the sustained, he goes back to his position at Pond Hill.
That would be a travesty. Anyway, I have a question on e-hall passes. What's the value of that? Not in dollars, but in benefit.
So the benefit is, as we talked last week, so it's a safety and security thing where we can see where the students are. Throughout the building, it will stop the wandering throughout the hallway. They're asking for a pass, whether it's to use the bathroom, to go down to the office. So it's an ability for the teacher to approve the pass, know where that student is, know where the final destination is. If they're out for a very long period of time, then the classroom teacher is aware, the administration is aware, because teachers are teaching and time is going and they're engulfed in their lessons and what they're doing, and so they're not always paying attention, rightfully so, to how long someone has been in or out. So it's a safety issue along with it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Roscoe?
Thank you. Mrs. Turner, can I ask a clarifying question? You had said related to the school psychologist, understood that there's the need that we're dealing with, but then also the assessment piece, and that we are getting out of our, I'll call them lead time guidelines, kind of out of compliance. I think of it as a healthcare worker, like we're getting out of
We're
compliance.
not out of compliance.
Okay, perfect. Perfect, great.
No, I'm going to clarify that. They're struggling
To stay
but
compliant.
we're not out of compliance. yes.
Okay, and the reason I ask is because with growing caseloads, we see that we talk about the continuing growing need in our district. Can I respectfully ask how close to being out of compliance could we become if this position isn't funded? Just
Sure.
And-
I guess the best way to answer that is I've contracted with ACEs for school psychologists to do some of our testing because we can't manage it. We're really struggling.
Okay.
So they are, what's happening is they're not able to see students at times, right? And I've got school psychologists that are working to 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night in the building, trying to do their school psychologist work, which is primarily testing, to be honest with you,
Sure.
because they're in crisis all day.
Okay.
So it really is impacting them. And on top of it, if you'll see, our numbers of students have been increasing every year. And that's why we're asking for the speech and language assistant, because we continue to increase the need, and the needs of the students are increasing.
Correct, okay, understood. And am I safe to say we're paying either way? Whether we're paying the person from ACE, I mean,
Yes.
just to put it bluntly, like we're paying someone
Yes.
from ACEs, or we're putting someone in our district who can then also help with other needs?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for the clarification, appreciate it. And I wasn't saying you were out of compliance, I just was wondering, how close are we? 'Cause-
Mrs. Versace?
What is the caseload size of the school psychologists? And also, is it safe to say that they're mostly just dealing with students with IEPs and 504s?
Not at all. They're dealing with regular education students, special education students, and students with 504s, especially at our elementary level, to be honest with you, because the principals are by themselves. They use our social workers and psychologists as a support system for all students, and they're often going to crisis calls all day and working with families and working with teachers to support our students with behaviors are increasing in the schools, and they're dealing with a lot of that support and a lot of the early intervention piece to support those families.
And then at the high school level, the the support of, or the sort of teaming of school psychologist, social worker, and then where does the guidance counselor?
So the
Counselors
counselors,
come in?
the counselors work primarily with students with 504 accommodation plans. They do all the 504 accommodation plans and the general education students. So they work in collaboration with the school psychologists and the social workers, but they primarily work with those general education students.
And you haven't seen a need yet to increase number of guidance counselors at the high school level?
I think we're good with counselors with our numbers that we have because the number of students, regular education students, has kind of stayed the same. They are working in tandem to support each other.
Okay, thanks.
Dr. Reed?
So, you know, we have our sustained budget that we need all of those things. This strategic enhancement is less than 1% of what we're putting forward. These things pertain to mental health, moving our kids instructionally, a curriculum, behavior. I have a hard time not supporting things that would actually move education forward. We're always on that cusp of keeping things, you know, budget where we can afford everything. At what point are we going to move education forward? And these things are being asked for to do that. So I think it's really important to remember that as we're also trying to save money and be as, you know, financially responsible as possible. This is a piece of why we have a strategic enhancement request. So I think we just need, I want to keep that in the forefront of my mind as we move forward with this.
Mr. Votto?
Mrs. Turner, you said that right now we source out through ACES for the testing. What's the cost for that? Estimated cost? Any idea?
It varies.
All right.
Because it's per hour.
Does
so
it total $84,000?
It does not total $84,000, no. No, we're looking at probably $3,000 to $6,000 a student. So, you know, if I do, it depends on how many students that I need. Right now, we have, it depends on how many triennials or reevaluations and outplacements next year. This year, we had about 20, so it's about 60,000 this year.
I'm just wondering if it's better to keep it, I mean, if it saves us some money to keep it the way it is. Just thought I'd throw that out there. The other thing I wanted to ask Mrs. Latour, which I really hesitate asking, but I will. You said that we have 2 middle school instructional coaches?
Yes.
Okay. And they primarily deal with STEM and humanities? Is that
There's
what you
one humanities and one STEM coach, yes.
Could the instructional leaders at the high school take on that responsibility as well?
I think that would be spreading them kind of thin. As it is now, they are on an A-B rotation with the high school, and they are busy all day long. They are in classrooms. They are working with the building principals and the school counselors. And, you know, I know it's a large ask. I do, for the instructional coaches that are in the budget, or even just the instructional coaches that I have layered at each level. But I think, you know, I agree with Dr. Reed's point in that we have a well-articulated, well-aligned curriculum. Our point where we are right now is ensuring that that's implemented and our students are benefiting from that in a consistent way. And our principals' plate is overflowing with all of the building level things that they have to do. And so these coaches are in those classrooms daily working with our instructors to ensure that our students are benefiting from that curriculum and progressing and moving forward. And so when we look at our high schools, we have Lyman Hall and Sheehan that have large departments in those 4 content areas, and that person is floating back and forth. We have just the 2 at the middle school, and they're floating back and forth. To only leave 4 for 8 elementary schools is a disservice to what we're trying to do. They have worked so hard building up relationships with our teachers in order to move instruction and assessment forward. And if we left just the 4 at, the K2 level, I would have to reevaluate the structure and either spread them very, very thinly, in which case it's not effective.
But it can be, to a
But
certain
it,
extent.
if you're being split that much between schools and you're only there a week or 2, in a month at a particular school, it doesn't become effective. One of the biggest drivers for student achievement, instructional coaches has one of the highest success rates, right? We know our curriculum is good. We're proud of our curriculum. We are now refining its implementation, because you can have a great curriculum on paper, but if it gets clunky in the implementation piece of it because of a variety of different things, time constraints, varying abilities within the class, how it's interpreted by the educator, those coaches being in those classrooms frequently, working side by side with the teacher has benefited our students. And don't forget, we have a brand new reading curriculum. K1, this year is year 1. 2-3, it's year 2. 4-5, it's year 3. Math, year 1, K and 2. Next year will be 1 and 3. Then it'll, go on. So, and science is changing, and elementary teachers' workload related to content and what they're teaching is significant. And so having these support specialists, the coaches side by side with them, and looking at what does the standard mean, how is it implemented within the classroom, what's the best instructional approach to take, makes a huge difference in how our students are absorbing that content information and being able to apply it independently with mastery. So I can talk all night about
Yes.
this. But I just, without any disrespect, I am passionate about the support that this offers our teaching staff, and we are in a position now, more so than we've been, where more and more staff are taking advantage of that because they have built relationships with the coaches that are in these positions, and they are welcoming them in their room. These ladies are all busy every day, every minute, and so while they're not elbow to elbow with the student every single minute of the day, their impact in the classroom is felt by all. The teachers feel supported, which is huge, and our students are benefiting from it. So
Well,
I'll end there.
I just want to say, we all bring something to the table here. And to Dr. Reed's point, we're all here to do what's best. And if we can add these things, because they're educationally sound in one way or another, or for safety reasons, I think we all bring something. I think, my history in education and teaching, and without instructional coaches, and we did all the things that you just mentioned on our own. That's, and you know where I feel about that. And it's certainly no reflection on absolutely no need, but I think some people do need the coaching, and I think they welcome it, and that's what, to me, you have an administrator for. I also hear, as a board member, from teachers that they don't want the coaches in their classrooms. You have to listen to that too, So, where do we slice it? So what I was thinking is, if you wanted some of those, some of these other things on here, that's why I brought up, could the high school people take over the middle school as well, the responsibilities? I remember when I taught middle school, I was sort of a department chair curriculum for 6A, 612, and I did it on my prep period and after school. Do our teachers stay after school? Here's another thing I was thinking of before, talking about math labs and stuff. Do teachers stay after school and give help anymore? Does that happen?
Yes.
You know?
I think some do.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right, okay, Mr. Ross, all right, I'm just asking. My thing is, we're going from 5.8 to 6.5. 6.5 is gonna be cut, and so is 5.8.
Yes.
So I say, we take a consensus to move forward with all these things, and give the mayor 6.572, let him make those cuts, and then we'll come back to this page and we'll see what we have to cut. And I think we have to be honest with each other and say, do we need all these things or all of them, maybe part of these things? The one thing I am very concerned about is safety. We always talk about safety for our kids. And I think though that E-Hall Pass is very important. I taught school for many years. I have family members who teach high school. And let me tell you, when I tell them about this E-Hall Pass, they embrace it like you can't imagine, because they're tired of chasing children around a school. Children get into trouble when they're free like that. They're missing out on, I'm saying what I said the other day, right, because you brought the question up again today. They're missing instruction. No teacher should have to chase a child down the hall to look where they're going. That should not happen. And not only that, this, I believe, keeps track of everything. So the administration knows exactly what's going on in that school, and maybe they could come up with changes to make it better, having that data in front of them. And I think there is a safety issue involved, and I think that's why that one is so important. But anyway, going back to my original proposal, I like to propose that we send the mayor 6.572, which includes everything we want, sustain and strategic. And remember, strategic is more, no offense, it's more than just a wish list. It's things that we strategically think we need to have this school system continue on a positive track. Because I don't want people to get away with the idea that it's just extra stuff. Anyhow, that's my proposal, and I'll give it to you
Well, thank you.
to take on from there.
Thank you, Mr. Vado. Yeah, Mrs. Versace.
To go back to the instructional coaches quickly, do we have any key like performance indicator data from them that like ties to student achievement that can be like shared in a simple way? That, you know, I know you said that the data specifically around the instructional coaches is really powerful and positive. Is there a way that that can be shared in like a simple way that we can see it or the community can see it as it relates to like, okay, we have instructional coaches and student achievement has improved?
That is really hard to show, I'm going to be honest. I can give you participation data and how it's grown in terms of the number of staff members who have requested coaching and are working actively with coaches. I can show you classroom data of our screen information, of our ESPA, but, you know, student achievement data at the elementary level is regulated really down to either curriculum assessments or standardized assessments, which, as you know,
A snapshot,
can
I
be
know.
variable,
Yeah.
depending on the day, the time, the weather, you know, and how
I'm
the
not a
wind
huge
blows.
like measure on
I
testing person,
know.
but I know like it is what school systems are judged by, and
Yeah,
how you
I know.
receive, you know, blue ribbon excellence and all of those pieces. But if there's a way to tie, you know, we're spending these dollars on the instructional coaches and then we're seeing improvement in student achievement, I think that ends up being a no-brainer.
Understood.
Dr. Roscoe.
Thank you. Mr. Votto, I love your passion. It gets me excited. Every time I hear you speak, I love it. No, I think, right, it does get you in trouble, but I think that's why we're here, right? But I think also it'll be interesting to see what some of the surrounding towns are putting forward in their budget, because I can't imagine that our number is going to be so far off of what everybody else is putting out there. And of course, you know, this is just our ask, and I said this before, I really do think we undervalue ourselves when we cut ourselves before we even go forward to the mayor, because these are things that we know are going to your point, Dr. Reed, move education forward. It is what we need to sustain education in our district, and so I'm a proponent of putting the whole number forward. But I don't think it's going to be that far off, because just when we look around, like at the cost of actual living, like things are just going up, and so I hope that when we go before the mayor and the town council, will be able to maybe equate some of our ask to surrounding towns, which we are often compared to in our data. to be able to show that we are very much in line with everything else that is going on around us.
I would actually argue that we are doing better than some of our surrounding towns who were reliant on COVID-19 funding, and now that those grants are gone, they have driven themselves off a cliff. There are surrounding towns who have already said there will be layoffs because they do not have the funding. So I think that I would say kudos to our central office team for being very wise with these funds and spending them and using them and being very responsible with it, that we aren't in that situation, so.
Might I add, we are not asking for at least $500,000 for a reading program because
Yes.
we're all set with that.
Right. All right, so I'm going to try my math skills, Mr. Barone. The new number for sustained, I think, would be $120,177,391 by moving that part-time health office assistant into the sustained budget.
Can you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
Slowly.
120,177,391. Woohoo! That means the personnel number, just push it up by $9,991. But that's what the bottom line number for sustained would be, and then our new strategic number will be $794,344. Aw, dude.
Well, I got the percentages, I'm sorry, yeah. So sustained percentage is 5.872.
How could that go down?
It went up.
It went up. It was 5.863.
And now it's 5.8.
872.
Sustained went down, it's .700.
No, strategic went down.
I'm sorry,
Strategic went down to .70.
And the total is still 6.572.
Right. So the percent hasn't changed, just the individual. So I'm going to go ahead and take consensus based on those numbers. I will repeat them one more time. And neither did I. I have an English degree, dude.
Dude, in a long time.
Twice in one night.
So I am going to go ahead and take consensus to put forth a budget with a sustained number of $120,177,391 with a increased percent of 5.872 and a strategic budget of $794,344, which is a 0.70% increase, which does not change our total, which was, Mr. Barone, I don't have that number. 6.572% total. Does anyone have any questions? If not, I will go around the room and take consensus. Mr. Ross?
Yes.
Mr. Daring?
Yes.
Dr. Roscoe?
Yes.
Mrs. Passaretti?
Yes.
Mrs. Rosacci?
Yes.
Mr. Votto?
Yes.
Dr. Reed?
Yes.
Mrs. Reynes?
Yes.
And I am a yes. Woohoo! So with that, that is the end of this meeting, which also means we do not need a meeting on Thursday because this will be the budget that will be taken to the mayor. And then once we get the phone call from the mayor, we will then reconvene to discuss that number. And if we have to workshop, we will work. Well, we have to go through the town council. So if we need to workshop that, those will be further on. With that, and no other further business being before this meeting, I am going to call this meeting adjourned at 8:27.